Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. We all know the feeling, the one where we stand in front of the mirror inspecting every little imperfection, wondering what it would look like if we could change something about ourselves. Maybe it's the way we look, the way we act, or even how we think. We all have our insecurities, our flaws, and sometimes it feels like we could do so much more if we were just the best version of ourselves. Now, what if there was a way to do that? Not just one perfect version, but an enhanced version of you, in every possible way. The perfect you physically, mentally, free from all the self-doubt. This idea where the substance comes in, a mind-bending concept that promises to transform us into the ideal version we've always dreamed of. But what if instead of creating just one flawless new identity, the substance gave you multiple versions of yourselves? Imagine if each clone represented a different aspect of your personality, your strengths, your fears, your desires, your darkest impulses. And what if those clones didn't get along with each other? What if they fought for dominance over who you were supposed to be? Today we're going to explore the what if scenario. We're going to dive deep into the consequences, the chaos, and the ultimate unraveling of a person's identity when multiple versions of themselves are created. Let's dig in. Let's first set the stage in the world of the substance. The user consumes a special liquid, one that promises to alter both your physical appearance and your mental state. It's marketed as the ultimate form of self-improvement, where you can take all of your flaws and transform them into your perfect self. One single version of you, but better. No more insecurities, no more doubts. Now the characters we're going to focus on today is Elizabeth. Elizabeth is an average woman trying to live up to the pressures of society, work, and her own expectations. She struggles with self-worth, self-image, and like many of us, the desire to be better, more confident, more accepted. So when Elizabeth drinks the substance, she's hoping to create a new version of herself, a person who has everything she lacks: confidence, charisma, self-assurance. But here's the twist. Instead of creating one flawless version of herself, the substance fractures Elizabeth's psyche. Instead of the one new self, she gets multiple clones, each one pulling from a different corner of her personality. One clone, for example, is confident and outgoing, living out her dreams of success. Another clone represents her deepest insecurities, the one where she hides from the world. Then there's the clone who represents her anger and frustration, the one that has never been able to forgive herself. And finally, the clone that embodies her vulnerability and fear, the side of herself that crumbles in the face of rejection. What happens when these different versions of Elizabeth begin to interact with each other? Now let's really explore how this would play out in Elizabeth's life instead of one idealized self. Elizabeth is now living with several versions of herself. It's as if the internal battles she's always faced are now externalized, forced to live and breathe in her own body. Imagine one of those clones, the confident, go-getter version of Elizabeth, taking over. She walks into a room full of energy, ready to take on the world. She's charismatic, she's poised, and for once, Elizabeth feels like she can finally conquer her fears and pursue her ambitions. But then the insecurity clone shows up. This version represents all the self-doubt that Elizabeth tries to bury, whispers fears into her mind, questioning her worth, telling her to be confident clown is just a facade. It's a lie. This clone doesn't want Elizabeth to succeed. It sabotages her at every turn, perhaps by getting in the way of important decisions, causing her to second-guess herself or break down in front of others. This creates the first rift. The confident version is trying to push forward while the insecure version is holding her back. And then there's the clone fueled by anger, the one that represents all the frustration Elizabeth has held inside for years. This clone is furious, not just at the world but at herself for never living up to expectations. She might lash out, creating chaos in her life, acting impulsively, doing things Elizabeth would never dream of doing in her right mind. This anger clone may even take over at the worst times, sabotaging relationships or career opportunities in a fit of rage. And let's not forget the emotional clone, the fragile side of Elizabeth, the one who hides behind a mask of strength, only to break down in a moment of vulnerability. How does this emotional clone affect her relationships, especially when it enters a room when least expected? In a way, it's like living with all of your inner demons made flesh. These versions are fighting to be the dominant personality, each pulling Elizabeth in a different direction. Her identity is no longer whole, it's fractured into competing, sometimes hostile parts. Now, as you can imagine, this wouldn't be easy for Elizabeth. The moment these clones start to clash, everything in her life begins to spiral out of control. Let's break down what happens when the internal conflict goes external. One minute, she might be the confident, ambitious woman we all wish we could be, the ideal version of herself. But the very next minute, she could be overtaken by the insecure clown, questioning every step she takes, paralyzed by self-doubt and an indecision. At work, for example, she might be on the verge of a major breakthrough, but then out of nowhere, the angry clone shows up, storming out of meetings or picking fights with coworkers, throwing all of her progress into chaos. Relationships, they won't survive this kind of internal war. Imagine trying to explain to a friend, a partner, or family member why you're acting so differently one day, or why you're suddenly burst into tears for no reason. They wouldn't know who they were dealing with. Which version of Elizabeth are they talking to? How do you maintain a relationship when you can't even keep your own identity intact? The longer this goes, the worse it gets. The clone starts to rebel against each other, and their actions spiral. They may begin to sabotage one another in more dramatic ways. The angry clone might tear down the relationships Elizabeth is trying to build with others, alienating friends and colleagues. The emotional clone might convince Elizabeth to give up on her dreams, retreating into a world of self-doubt. Every time Elizabeth tries to move forward, a new clone is ready to pull her back down. Now let's talk about the real cost of this chaos. The more fractured Elizabeth becomes, the more she loses her grip on reality. She may start questioning what's real and what's part of her fractured mind. The clones, these different versions of herself, are living in her head, but their actions are very much real in the world outside. They make decisions, they take action, they talk to people, they affect the outcome of every situation. At some point, it may become impossible to tell where the real Elizabeth ends and where the clones begin. The emotional weight of constantly shifting between versions would be unbearable. Can she ever reconcile the different parts of herself? Can she make peace with the clones, or are they doomed to tear her apart? The real danger is when the clones start rebelling, each fighting for control over her body. What happens when the rage clone makes a life-altering decision without Elizabeth's consent? Or when the insecure clone sabotages her best chance at happiness because it's too scared of success? This kind of chaos doesn't just affect Elizabeth, it affects everyone in her life. Those around her will start noticing her behavior change, and it will be hard to trust her. She becomes unpredictable, unstable. At that point, it may be too late to save anything. In the end, the chaos created by multiple clones doesn't just make Elizabeth's life difficult, it unravels her every sense of self. The pursuit of perfection, of creating the perfect version of herself, ultimately leads to a fractured identity. The substance which was supposed to give her control and freedom ends up giving her confusion and chaos instead. In trying to be perfect herself, she loses who she was in the first place. So what's the takeaway from all of this? Perfection comes at a price sometimes. Trying to become the best version of yourself can lead to the very destruction of the very thing you're trying to improve. The substance promises change, but at what cost? Can anyone really handle the weight of multiple selves? I'd love to know what you guys think about this. Could you live with multiple versions of yourself? Or would you prefer to stay true to the person you are? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and as always, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell button for more deep dives into the what if scenarios. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.